The valley was heavy with the scent of wet earth and pine, the kind of stillness that follows a storm's wrath. Elias trudged along the ridge, his boots crunching against the gravelly path, his breath visible in the chilly dawn. He was checking the traps he'd set for foxes that had been troubling his small herd of goats when a sound stopped him. A sharp, broken sob carried by the wind. It wasn't the cry of an animal, but something human, fragile and raw. His pulse quickened and he scanned the horizon, the mist curling like ghosts around the pines. There it was again, fainter now, coming from the gully below. Elias adjusted the rifle slung across his shoulder and descended the slope, his boots slipping on loose stones. The air grew colder as he neared the bottom, where a shallow creek wound through the rocks. And there, half hidden by a tangle of wild blackberry bushes, he saw her. She was curled against a boulder, her clothes soaked and torn, her dark hair plastered to her pale face. Her eyes, wide with fear and pain, met his as he approached. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling like a leaf caught in a gust. "I can't move." Elias knelt beside her, his movements slow and deliberate, as if approaching a wounded animal. "I'm here," he said, his voice low and steady. "You're not alone anymore. Can you tell me what happened?" Her name, she said, was Layla. She'd been hiking the old trail to meet her brother in the next town when she'd slipped on the rain-slick rocks and tumbled into the gully. Her ankle was twisted, maybe broken, and a deep gash ran along her forearm, caked with dirt and blood. She winced as she tried to shift, her breath hitching. "It hurt so much," she said, her voice cracking. "I thought I'd die out here." Elias's chest tightened. He'd seen injuries like hers before. His father had been a medic in the war, and Elias had learned enough to know a wound like that could turn deadly if not treated soon. "We need to get you warm and clean that cut," he said, his tone calm despite the urgency building in his gut. "Can you trust me to help you?" Layla nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I don't have anyone else." He removed his wool jacket and draped it over her shoulders, the fabric swallowing her slight frame. Carefully, he slid one arm under her knees and another behind her back, lifting her as gently as he could. She gasped, her fingers digging into his shoulder, but she didn't cry out. The walk back to his cabin was slow, the path uneven and treacherous in the dim light. Elias spoke to her as they went, his voice a steady anchor. He told her about the valley, how the creek swelled after a storm, how the wildflowers would blanket the hills come spring. She listened, her breathing easing slightly, though her grip on him never loosened. The cabin came into view, a squat, weathered structure nestled against a stand of pines. Inside, Elias set Layla on the worn leather couch near the fireplace, stoking the embers until a warm glow filled the room. He fetched a basin of warm water, clean cloths, and a small tin of salve his father had taught him to make from herbs. Layla watched him, her eyes wary but grateful as he knelt beside her. "This might sting," he warned, dipping a cloth into the water. He cleaned the gash on her arm first, working carefully to avoid causing more pain. The wound was deep, the edges ragged, but the bleeding had slowed. Layla bit her lip, her hands clenching the edge of the couch, but she didn't pull away. "I'm sorry," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." Elias shook his head, his hands steady as he applied the salve. "You're not trouble. You're hurt and you need help. That's all there is to it." When he reached her ankle, he frowned. It was swollen, the skin bruised a deep purple. "This needs to be stabilized," he said. "I'll wrap it, but you'll have to stay off it for a while." He fashioned a makeshift splint from a piece of wood and strips of cloth, his movements practiced and sure. Layla watched him, her expression softening. "You've done this before," she said. Not a question, but a statement. Elias nodded, his eyes distant for a moment. "My father taught me. Said you never know when you'll need to patch someone up out here." When he finished, he handed her a tin mug of chamomile tea, the steam curling in the firelight. "Rest now," he said. "I'll keep an eye on you." Layla sipped the tea, her hands trembling slightly. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice small. "You don't even know me." Elias sat across from her, the fire casting shadows across his weathered face. "Because you needed someone, and I was here." The night settled over the cabin, the wind howling softly outside. Elias stayed awake, checking Layla's wound every few hours, watching for signs of fever or infection. Her breathing grew steadier as she slept, her face peaceful in the firelight. He thought of his father, of the lessons he'd learned about healing not just bodies but hearts. Layla had been alone, scared, and ashamed of her vulnerability. Elias knew that feeling too well, the weight of carrying pain in silence. As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Layla stirred. Her eyes found Elias and a faint smile touched her lips. "You're still here," she said, her voice hoarse but warm. "Of course," he replied, pouring her another mug of tea. "You're not getting rid of me that easily." She laughed, a soft, broken sound, and told him more about herself. She was a schoolteacher, she said. On her way to visit her brother after a long year of work, the trail had seemed safe enough, but the storm had caught her off guard. "I thought I could handle it," she admitted, her cheeks flushing. "I didn't want to need anyone." Elias leaned forward, his voice gentle. "No one gets through this world alone. Not even the strongest of us." The day passed quietly. Layla rested, her strength returning in small increments. Elias kept busy with chores, chopping wood, feeding the goats, checking the traps, but he always returned to check on her. By afternoon, he brought her a book of poetry from his small shelf, and she read to him as he repaired a broken chair. Her voice was soft, lilting, and Elias found himself pausing to listen, the words weaving a quiet spell over the cabin. As evening fell, the sky cleared, revealing a tapestry of stars above the valley. Layla sat by the window, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes bright with wonder. "It's so beautiful here," she said. "I never noticed before." Elias joined her, his presence a quiet comfort. "The valley has a way of showing you what matters," he said. "You just have to look." Layla turned to him, her expression earnest. "I was so scared, Elias. Not just of the pain, but of being seen like that, helpless, broken. You didn't make me feel weak, you just helped." He met her gaze, his voice steady. "You're not weak, Layla, you're stronger than you know. You made it through the storm, and you'll make it through this." She reached for his hand, her touch tentative but warm. "I don't want to be alone again," she whispered. "You're not," Elias said, his hand closing gently over hers. "Not anymore." As the fire crackled and the stars burned bright, Elias felt a quiet shift inside him. The valley, with its harsh beauty and unforgiving storms, had brought them together. And in that moment, he knew he'd do whatever it took to help Layla heal. Not just her wounds, but the deeper hurts she carried, the ones no one could see. The days that followed were a rhythm of small, steady moments. Layla's strength returned slowly, her ankle healing under Elias's careful attention. The gash on her arm began to close, the angry red fading to a faint scar. She insisted on helping around the cabin, hobbling on a crutch Elias had carved from a sturdy branch. She washed dishes, mended a torn shirt, and even tried her hand at kneading dough for bread, laughing when it stuck to her fingers. "I'm a teacher, not a baker," she said, her eyes sparkling with humor. Elias found himself smiling more, the cabin less lonely with Layla's presence. Her laughter filled the quiet spaces, her voice a melody that lingered long after she spoke. They fell into an easy routine, Elias tending the goats and checking the traps, Layla reading or tidying the cabin, their evenings spent by the fire, sharing stories of their lives. Layla spoke of her childhood in a bustling town, her love for teaching and the ache of losing her parents to illness. Elias shared fragments of his own past, his father's lessons, his mother's songs, and the solitude he'd chosen after their deaths. "You don't talk much about yourself," Layla said one evening, her eyes searching his. "Why do you stay out here alone?" Elias poked at the fire, the flames casting shadows across his face. "It's simpler," he said. "The valley doesn't judge. It just is." Layla nodded, her expression thoughtful. "But it must get lonely." He met her gaze, a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. "It did, until now." One morning, a week after Layla's arrival, a horse appeared on the ridge. Ridden by a man with a familiar face, Layla's brother Caleb. He dismounted, his expression a mix of relief and worry as he rushed into the cabin. "Layla," he exclaimed, pulling her into a tight embrace. "I thought I'd lost you." "I'm okay," Layla said, her voice steady. "Elias found me. He saved me." Caleb turned to Elias, his gratitude palpable. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice thick. "She's all the family I've got." Elias shook his head, a faint smile on his lips. "No thanks needed. I'm just glad she's safe." Caleb stayed for the day, sharing a meal of roasted vegetables and fresh bread. The cabin was alive with conversation, the warmth of family filling the space. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Caleb took Layla's hand. "Come home with me," he said. "The town's waiting for you," Layla hesitated, her eyes flickering to Elias. I want to stay a little longer, she said. I'm not fully healed and I want to help Elias here. He's done so much for me. Caleb studied her, then nodded, a knowing smile tugging at his lips. All right, but I'll be back to check on you. The weeks that followed were a tapestry of shared work and quiet moments. Layla's ankle grew stronger, and she began joining Elias outside, helping with small tasks like gathering kindling or feeding the goats. They worked side by side, their movements synchronized, their silence comfortable. One afternoon, as they repaired a fence near the creek, Layla paused, her eyes on the water. I used to be afraid of places like this, she said. Too wild, too unpredictable, but now it feels like home. Elias looked at her, his heart stirring. The valley grows on you, he said. It teaches you to trust it. And you, Layla added, her voice soft. You taught me to trust myself again. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Layla spoke of her fears, the shame of needing help, the weight of feeling like a burden. I thought I had to be strong all the time, she said. But you showed me it's okay to lean on someone. Elias reached for her hand, his touch warm and steady. We all need someone, Layla, even me. She smiled, her eyes bright with emotion. I want to stay, Elias, not just to heal, but to build something here. With you. His heart swelled and he squeezed her hand. There's nothing I want more. The seasons turned and the valley bloomed with life. Layla and Elias worked together, their bond deepening with every shared task, every quiet moment. They planted a small garden, the earth yielding herbs and vegetables under their care. Layla taught Elias to read poetry, her voice weaving stories of love and loss, while Elias showed her how to track deer through the pines, his quiet pride evident in her quick learning. One spring morning, a year after Elias had found her in the gully, Layla stood by the creek, wildflowers tucked into her hair. She turned to Elias, her smile radiant. I was lost when you found me, she said. Not just in the valley, but in myself. You gave me a place to belong. Elias took her hand, his voice steady but full of emotion. You gave me the same, Layla. A reason to open the door again. They stood together, the valley stretching out before them, alive with the hum of insects and the rush of the creek. The wildflowers swayed in the breeze, their colors bright against the green. And as the sun climbed higher, Elias and Layla knew that the deepest wounds, those of the heart, could heal with time, trust and the courage to face them together. The valley, with its storms and silences, had become their home, and in its vast, wild embrace they found not just survival, but a life woven with hope, love, and the promise of new beginnings.